For the last 6 years, if you were looking to buy the least expensive new Lexus here in America, a lot of dealers would have happily pointed you over to the CT200H. It was essentially the previous generation Prius wrapped in a different body style to kind of give it more of a hot hatch look. Now, sales were tepid at best, so Lexus discontinued the CT back in 2017, which left a pretty big void in the Lexus showroom for entry-level buyers looking to spend a lot less money, which is why I'm standing by that vehicle's replacement. This is the all-new 2019 Lexus UX250H. It's based off of the same platform that underpins the Corolla hatchback and the Toyota CH-R, but instead it comes standard with all-wheel drive. It's got a hybrid powertrain with about 12 more horsepower versus the non-hybrid version. So the big question I want answered in the ever-competitive small luxury CUV segment, does the new UX250H have a chance? That's what we're here to find out. So earlier this year when I tested the UX200, I'll be honest, I was pretty disappointed with that car. I found it to be very underpowered, a little bit too noisy, especially with a car that wears the L badge at the front in that grille. Now, Lexus promised me that the hybrid version would be the one to get because it's quicker, it gets better gas mileage, and it's a lot quieter versus the gas-only version. Now, of course, starting with underneath the hood, this is where this particular one's going to differ, and it shows that it's kind of the spiritual successor to the old CT200. Now, gone was the old Prius powertrain that was in that CT200. It's been replaced by a new powertrain. It's a 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine that makes 143 horsepower on its own and 133 pound-feet of torque. Now that's actually less power than what you got in the 2-liter that's in the UX200. However, because it has 2 electric motors, one for the front and then one that drives the rear axle, you get a combined output of 181 horsepower, which is 12 more than what you get in the UX200. Still pretty paltry numbers considering when you look at the class. I mean, you have the Mercedes GLA, which has a 2-liter turbo engine, the upcoming Audi Q3, and then of course the BMW X1 all have more power than this. Now, because this is a hybrid that's not turbocharged, it gets excellent gas mileage. In fact, I would say this is probably the most fuel efficient of the luxury small SUVs. Lexus says this is rated at 41 in the city, 38 on the highway. That is about 2 mpg less than what you got in the old CT. However, with standard all-wheel drive, this thing does weigh a lot more than the old UX or CT and the UX200, which this one at 3,600 pounds weighs about 300 pounds more than that gas model. Now, it all goes out through a different CVT versus the UX200. This is a more of their hybrid CVT. It doesn't actually have that physical first gear. Lexus doesn't rate this thing to tow or anything like that. It's not supposed to really go off-road, but they did say 0 to 60 times should be around the 8.5-second mark, which we'll go into the test drive later on and we'll see how this thing actually drives. Now, shutting the hood and looking at the rest of the styling, you can see this is a particularly attractive looking SUV when you look at it from certain angles. It's definitely going to stand out. You have the big gaping Lexus spindle grille at the front. You have standard LED headlights across every trim level of this vehicle. You have an LED low and high beam. And then you have LED fog lights down here, just an incandescent turn signal, which kind of surprised me. But overall, this one with the F-Sport package does give it a slightly unique mesh finish grille with the intricate L's that makes it look a little bit more aggressive. You have that dark chrome trim here and there. I mean, overall, this looks more like a hatchback as opposed to an SUV because it's not that much taller than something like the new Corolla hatchback. From this angle, you can really see what I mean when I said this is more like a hatchback as opposed to an SUV. It's basically following the same trend of adding some cladding and making hatchbacks look a little bit taller to make this thing look like a crossover. It's not really a crossover because at only 59.8 inches in height, it's only about 2 inches taller than a Corolla hatchback. It really just gives it a stance of a regular hatchback instead of a crossover. Now, its wheelbase at 103.8 inches long is about an inch longer than the old CT. About the same length as the new CH-R. Its overall length at 177 inches long is about 6 inches longer than the CH-R. So this is the same size as the UX200 that I tested earlier this year. But again, this is still very small even by modern day standards. Now you can see this F-Sport model has these very attractive set of 18-inch wheels finished in this graphite finish. They're wrapped in 225 with tires. These are all season tires. And honestly, looking at the rest of the side profile here, there are some attractive angles and then there's some angles of the car where I kind of think, I could really do without the cheap looking plastic cladding. I really wish the windows back here were tinted. They're not tinted because I feel like the EPA classifies this more as a hatchback as opposed to an actual crossover. And you can see this one here does have a sunroof. If you're looking for a big panoramic sunroof, it's just not available on the UX. From the rear of the vehicle, it has a much more distinctive look over the front fascia. I especially like the taillights that are connected here at the center where it's forming one continuous long LED strip. You have LED turn signals, you have an LED reverse light, and then you have more of that black plastic cladding here at the lower fascia with some nicely integrated parking sensors. No visible exhaust tips. I wasn't really expecting that, especially since this is supposed to be a hybrid vehicle. Now, power tailgate is actually optional. You have to add in a special luxury package to get that. Now, this is where the UX is really going to fall short for me in terms of the cargo flexibility. The hybrid battery packs are underneath the floor here, so they do take up some space versus the gas-only model, which only had a paltry 22 cubic feet of space. This one's even less at 17 cubic feet of space. Now, you can fold down those seats, but I couldn't find any actual numbers from Lexus, what you get when the seats are folded. This is actually more space than the old CT200H by about 3 cubic feet, so they did improve it there, but honestly, this is very small, even by this class of vehicle. Now, underneath here, you can see there is some storage underneath here. There's no actual spare tire, but overall, you're going to probably want to look at the competition if you actually want an SUV with more cargo space. So it's kind of the same story here for the back seat of the UX250H. It only has about 33 inches of legroom back here, and just like the CH-R, the opening is kind of small. This door doesn't open any more larger than this right here, which can make, you know, getting a car seat into this a little bit challenging, or if you have taller friends. Now, I'll get back here just to show you guys what I mean. I'm only 5'7", I'm short, but for me, the space is actually not bad. I did have to duck my head slightly here. I have decent amount of foot space underneath the front seats, but as you can see here, this is with the seat for me to drive. It really doesn't provide that much space. Now, thankfully, this is a Lexus, even though this is their entry-level product. You do have 2 USB ports, you have rear seat air vents back here, which surprised me, but unfortunately, the materials here on the door panel, they are hard-touch plastic. So in case you guys haven't figured out what ASC stands for, it actually stands for active sound control. Like so many other new cars today, the UX250H will create fake engine sounds, or it'll amplify the engine noises. And most of the times, those systems sound pretty good and they sound genuine. I mean, most of the times the manufacturer has to tell me it's a fake engine noise, which we'll go to that later on in the driving portion. Now, first of all, I'm going down this usual stretch of road, which is pretty crappy. And even though this has the F-Sport package, it has 18-inch wheels, this thing rides like I expect a Lexus would ride. It's a very soft and cushy ride quality. It's really quiet in here. The car's cruising along in electric only, mode right now, which is definitely nice. It just makes this thing feel a lot more, upscale than the last CH-R I drove, and it automatically feels better than the last UX200 that I drove, just because I just didn't like how that car had the same powertrain out of a Corolla hatchback. It just doesn't make sense in a vehicle that has a Lexus badge, but going down the road here, the visibility also is good out of the front. The car is small, but the view out of the back is obscured, so it kind of makes this small size in this thing a little bit negated, because you can't really see out of the back. Now, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there is literally a fake, Formula One V6 that's screaming in the background, and you hear it coming from that front speaker. Let me put my foot down here and I'll let you guys see if you can actually hear it. If you heard that, there's literally 2 forms of noise in this car. The 2-liter gas engine that's screaming with the CVT, which the car tries to mute in the background, but then when you have it in sport mode here, the response is slow, but you literally hear the fake V6 with its fake shifts coming from that front speaker. It's horrible. I don't get it. This is probably the worst of the worst in terms of fake engine noises that I've ever heard in a modern production car. It's weird because, this car actually has a tach when you put it into a sport mode, and you see the tach needle bouncing around, but then you hear that fake engine, and it tries to match where the tach is, but you can clearly tell that it's augmented. It's like they recorded the V6 out of a Toyota Camry and just decided to put it in here, which is fine, but really put a V6 in this car. Don't give me this fake engine sound with this 2-liter, which I couldn't get over. Now, you can turn that off by going into the normal mode here, and then the noise goes away. It's still kind of in the background, then you have to push this button over here on the dash, which completely turns it off, and I can go back into the sport mode here, and that'll turn off the fake engine noise. So I can talk about the acceleration in this thing, because it does have 12 more horsepower than the regular model. Now, the one thing about Toyota or Lexus hybrids, they are dare I say, they're starting to feel a little bit more like old tech because, you know, it still uses a nickel metal hydride battery. It still drives mostly off of the gas engine, especially when you need maximum power. And they're just kind of laggy off the line. Now, granted, this does feel quicker than the gas-only model. 0 to 60 time should be around the 8.5 second range. This is a lot faster than the old CT200, which took around 10.5 seconds to get to 60 because that was just a dog. But overall, I'm just not quite satisfied enough. I mean, sure, this thing has really good MPG. It's not gonna get you into trouble in terms of speed, but I just think with a car with a luxury brand, people expect 0 to 60 in like the 6.5 second or below 6 second mark nowadays. And you can get that from a lot of the competitors for this car. So I would like to see Lexus, you know, just stuff the NX's 2-liter turbo in this thing and call it a day, offer a performance version, something like that. I mean, overall, the hybrid model does drive a little bit more pleasantly than the gas-only model because it's just less buzzy, so I appreciate that. Now, the steering in this car also is relatively quick, but it's just really light and numb. This car, it definitely has been tuned for softness. I mean, even with the F-Sport badges all over this car, it doesn't feel like I'm driving like a hot hatch or like a sporty car. It just feels like a comfortable car that's trying a little too hard to be sporty. The seats do hug you in place really nicely. It's got a really quiet interior. When you turn off that silly active sound control, it's just very, very quiet, very hushed in here, very little road and wind noise. I mean, the whole atmosphere in this car is good. I feel like I'm driving a luxury car until I put my foot down where it feels a little bit too slow. Now, thankfully, because this car is so sluggish, it does get good gas mileage. In my week's worth of testing, I easily averaged 38 miles to the gallon, which is phenomenal for something like this. And the all-wheel drive system is appreciated, but keep in mind that the Lexus all-wheel drive system in this car, the rear wheels are driven entirely by the electric motor, and they will stop working after 45 miles an hour. So only at lower speeds will this vehicle actually be all-wheel drive. At higher speeds, it'll actually only just be a front-wheel drive model because the gas engine is only powering the front wheels. Turn the active sound control back on. Fake engine noise. It is hilarious with that fake engine noise. God, why did you do this, Lexus? It sounds terrible. Now, the CVT does offer a manual mode, which offers 6 different virtual ratios. Again, even it tries to mimic the sounds when I downshift here. And it matches the paddles. When I flick the paddle, the fake engine sound creates a shift, even though the tack isn't actually moving. So very, very strange. But hey, you have to give Lexus props for trying to be different. I just don't know if the UX is different in a good way. So even though I don't particularly love this segment of vehicle, which launched really only a couple of years ago, my all-time favorite that I've driven so far is definitely the Volvo XC40. And I'm sad to say for Lexus, I do not like this car more than I liked the Volvo. Now, of course, there are a couple of strengths that the Lexus will give you. It gets better gas mileage. It has a much better reputation for reliability and quality. It technically is less expensive, and if you guys like the lines, you like the interior more, if you're just a Lexus fan, there are obviously reasons to choose this car. Now, one thing I like about the hybrid version, it's significantly improved over the old CT200h because, as you guys saw, it's got significantly more power, still slow, but not gutlessly slow like the Lexus CT200h was. I like the fact that all-wheel drive is standard, but really, I hate how Lexus calls this an SUV. If I think of this car more as a hatch with some stupid plastic cladding, I like it a lot more versus calling this thing an SUV because in my eyes, it's not an SUV. It doesn't sit up high enough. It really doesn't have enough space in the back seat. It really doesn't have enough space in the cargo area. And really, you could get a much more practical vehicle like a Mazda CX-5 or a Honda CR-V or Toyota's own RAV4 for less money or the same money, and you just have a vehicle that is just much better to use in the everyday real world. Now, with all that said, it's time to give the Lexus UX 250h a rating on our new RPM scale. Now, of course, starting with the R in Redline for real world usage, I'm gonna have to give this car a 6 out of 10 points because even though it is technically supposed to be an SUV, I think of this car more as a small hatch, so I'm gonna dock it for points because the back seat is very small, the trunk is very small, and the interior just feels cramped overall. Now, moving over to the I in efficiency in Redline, I'm gonna have to give this car an 8 out of 10 points because, hey, it gets almost 30 or almost 40 miles to the gallon. In my week's worth of testing, I easily got 38 miles to the gallon, so easily I'll give this an 8 out of 10 points. Now, moving on to the D in Redline for desirability, I'm gonna have to give this car a 3 out of 10 points. And really, I gave it a low score because I just don't particularly think this car feels desirable. Now, of course, desirability is all going to be my own opinion. Some of you may think this car is a lot nicer than I think it is, but really, I think that you could get a car like the Toyota RAV4 Adventure, and it has a much higher desirability factor for me, even though that car is missing the Lexus badge. Now, moving on to a category that you all are probably excited to see me talk about, longevity. And this is a Lexus, it's a Toyota product. So I'm gonna easily give this an 8 out of 10 points for longevity because it's got basically a Toyota powertrain. It has a very solidly built quality, and with Lexus and their reputation, you have to kind of factor that in. So we're gonna give it an 8 out of 10 points for longevity. Now, moving on to the I in Redline for innovation. Now, I have to say this car seems kind of innovative on paper. However, with its strange noises from the engine, which are fake, and the fact that this car, you know, for a luxury brand, I still want it to be, I want it to be faster. I wanted it to feel a little bit more special. So in terms of the innovation rating, I'm gonna have to give this car a 5 out of 10 points, simply because I think that some of the competitors feel a little bit more special. They feel a little bit more unique versus the UX250H. So moving on to the N in Redline for need for speed, I'm gonna have to give this car a 3 out of 10 points, simply because 0 to 60 in 8.6 seconds, that's really what I expect a compact car to do, like a Toyota Corolla. In a car that's a Lexus that has a near $40,000 price tag, I expected this thing to be 0 to 60 around the 6.5 second mark. So again, I'm gonna have to dock it points in the need for speed category, and I really just don't like the fake engine noises. Thankfully, you can at least turn that off. Now, last but not least, the last E in Redline for expense. And for expense, this is a category that I kind of struggled with choosing the right number. I'm gonna have to give this car a 5 out of 10 points, simply because it is still pretty inexpensive to own one of these. You can basically start it out around $32,000. The hybrid's gonna cost you $2,000 more. The F-Sport package on this one costs you $2,000 more. This one here, with the F-Sport package, with the luxury package, with a couple of upgrades on the interior, stickers for around $42,000, $42,370, which isn't really all that expensive. However, when you look at what you're getting, this is a small hatchback that's not very quick, that doesn't have very much space in the trunk capacity or the rear seat, and really you could get a mainstream non-luxury brand and just get a much better vehicle to live with on a daily basis. You really are just paying for a badge at this point, and you're paying for a car that is a little bit smaller. But again, if you like that, if you want that, it does make the UX a little bit more desirable, and it just makes a little bit more sense. But for most people, I fear that they're just going to end up choosing a RAV4 because it's just a better vehicle to live with on a daily basis. But with all that said, once you add up the entire score, you get a grand total of 38 out of 70 points, which, when you look at my table here of all of the scores that I've gotten so far, since I just started the Redline rating score, this is right now the lowest rated vehicle. But of course, once I add more vehicles to that list, it's going to expand, and I'm going to also start categorizing these vehicles by class. So when I get another Volvo XC40 to review, I'll definitely add it to the scale there, and they'll kind of adjust it, and it'll show where this car falls on the actual table when you add up all the numbers. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2019 Lexus UX250H. Overall, it's a huge improvement over the old CT200H. I just don't know if it's much better than what you can get from a lot of the European offerings, specifically the new Volvo XC40, and then of course there's the upcoming Audi Q3. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.